Everyone thought she was just clumsy. A broken glass here, a tray slipping there, but the truth? It wasn't an accident. Denise Carter, a 35-year-old single mother, balanced steaming plates with one good arm while her left wrist lay tightly wrapped in bandages. What no one at the diner realized was that her manager had done this to her, twisting it until something cracked, all to keep her silent. Yet there she was, working the morning rush with a faint smile, pretending nothing was wrong. Coffee pots hissed, bacon sizzled, customers laughed. But in the middle of the noise, Denise's quiet pain stood out. If only they knew what it really cost her to keep moving. And from the corner booth, one man was watching more closely than anyone else. Behind the counter, Ross Bennett, the manager, leaned against the register like a king on his throne. His sharp smirk widened each time Denise faltered. "Pick it up, Denise. Don't keep people waiting. You think this is a charity?" His words sliced through the chatter, loud enough for everyone to hear. Customers shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered pity, others disapproval. Denise bit her lip, swallowing the sting of his cruelty, but her bandaged hand trembled as she set down another mug. Ross didn't stop. He thrived on her discomfort, reminding her she was lucky to even have a job. What no one saw was the secret behind his cruelty, one that Denise carried in silence, and one that Ross would do anything to bury.
At table 3, 2 women in crisp business suits leaned closer. "Poor thing," one whispered. "She shouldn't even be working with that hand." The other shook her head. "Ross never lets up on her, always barking, always humiliating." Their hushed words weren't the only ones. Around the diner, customers traded uneasy glances, murmuring about Denise's struggle, but nobody dared to step in. Denise heard it all: the pity, the judgment, the laughter Ross sparked at her expense. Each whisper reminded her of the weight she carried: unpaid bills, overdue rent, a child waiting at home. Quitting wasn't an option. So she forced another smile, balancing trays like a fragile dance, hiding the truth that her silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. In the corner booth, an older man stirred his coffee slowly. White hair, neat trim, denim jacket faded from years of wear. His eyes were sharp, steady, unblinking. To everyone else, Harold Whitman looked like just another retiree passing time. They called him the vet, guessing from his posture, the quiet discipline in his movements. But Harold wasn't simply passing through. He was the owner of this very diner, watching his staff from the shadows, blending in to see the truth no manager's report could tell him. For weeks, he had seen Denise work harder than anyone, taking every hit Ross delivered. Today, with her hand bound and her face pale from strain, Harold knew something was wrong, and he wasn't going to ignore it. Every tray Denise lifted looked like it might slip. Every coffee pot threatened to spill. Her right arm carried more than it should, her back aching with the weight. And then, just one mistake. She turned too fast, bumping into Ross. A glass of water spilled down his shirt. The diner froze. Ross leaned in, his breath sour with coffee, his voice dripping venom. Clumsy again? Looking for excuses? Denise's apology was soft, barely audible. He snatched the towel from her hand, lips curling in a grin only she could see. A warning. Customers murmured, a man muttering, "Give her a break." But no one knew the truth. Weeks earlier, Denise had overheard Ross stealing from the register. His response had been brutal, twisting her wrist until it cracked. And that pain had never healed. Denise had never meant to hear it. That night, long after closing, she had been wiping tables when Ross's voice slipped through the thin office door. His laughter was smug, his words sharp. Easy money, straight from the register. She froze, listening, her pulse pounding. He bragged about skimming bills, about nobody catching on. Then the door creaked, and Ross found her standing in the hall. His eyes narrowed. His grin vanished. In one swift move, he seized her wrist, twisting until something cracked. Denise collapsed in pain, tears streaking her cheeks. "Clumsy, huh? Better keep it that way," Ross hissed. Since then, the bandages had become her prison, and her silence, his weapon. She worked on, carrying more than trays. She carried fear.
Morning after morning, Denise returned to the diner. Bills didn't wait. Rent didn't care. With her good hand, she carried trays, balanced plates against her hip, and forced smiles. Each step was a battle. Each order delivered a quiet act of courage. Sweat dripped down her back. Her arm ached from the endless strain, yet she never complained. To others, she looked fragile, bandaged, weary, cornered. But inside, she carried steel. For her child at home, she could endure anything. Still, the cracks showed. Customers saw the faint tremors in her hand, the way she bit her lip when pain surged. Harold, from his booth, saw it too. And the more he watched, the more he knew. Ross's cruelty wasn't incompetence, it was deliberate. Ross thrived on moments like these. When Denise faltered, he pounced. "Use both hands. Oh wait, you can't." His laugh cut across the diner like nails on glass. Customers shifted uncomfortably, a few muttering under their breath. Denise swallowed humiliation, eyes fixed on the floor. Ross strutted away, phone in hand, chuckling to himself. Harold's jaw tightened as he stirred his cold coffee. He had managed businesses for decades. He knew bias. He knew cruelty. This wasn't just tough management. This was targeted humiliation. Each word Ross spat wasn't about work. It was about control. Harold leaned back, his veteran instincts sharpening. He wasn't just witnessing poor leadership. He was seeing a predator at work, one who thought no one important was watching. But Ross was wrong. Day after day, Harold returned to his booth. To others, he was just another old man with nowhere better to be. But his eyes tracked every detail. If Denise poured coffee too slowly, Ross snapped. If she wiped a counter twice, he mocked her for wasting time. And when a fork clattered to the floor, Ross used it as proof of her carelessness. Customers chuckled nervously, unsure whether to laugh or wince. Denise bent low, cheeks burning, her good hand trembling. Harold's suspicion hardened into certainty. This wasn't coincidence. It was a campaign. Ross was building a case, setting her up for failure. Harold narrowed his eyes. He'd seen this game before, in boardrooms, in barracks, in battlefields. And he knew one truth. Men like Ross always overplayed their hand. That afternoon, Harold wandered toward the back, pretending to search for the restroom. The office door was ajar. Papers lay scattered across the desk. His sharp eyes scanned the pages, misconduct reports, every one bearing Denise's name. Spilled drinks, forgotten orders, bad attitude. Lies, all of them. He had eaten here for months, watched her work tirelessly, never once disrespectful. But worse was still to come. Financial sheets, cash register tallies that never balanced. Numbers dipped every week, yet no reports were filed. Harold's chest tightened. This was theft, pure and simple. And Ross wasn't just stealing money, he was building a scapegoat. Every false report, every cruel word was stacking blame onto Denise. Harold closed the folders softly. The truth was clear now, and the trap was set. That night, Harold stayed long after most customers left. The diner grew quiet, neon buzzing faintly against the windows. From the half-closed office door, voices leaked out. Ross's voice, slurred with drink, carried proudly. "Another $5 grand, easy!" And when they noticed the cash missing,
That little waitress takes the fall. She's already got the most write-ups." His buddy laughed, warning him he was reckless. Ross lowered his tone, colder now. "She won't talk, not with that hand. Broke it good enough to remind her who's in charge." Harold froze in the shadows, his knuckles white around his coffee mug. Rage burned through his calm exterior. This wasn't just theft, this was abuse, and now he knew exactly how far Ross would go to protect his lies. Harold stepped into the night air, lungs tight, fists still curled. For years, he had sat quietly in that booth, watching his business through others' eyes. He'd believed patience revealed truth, but this was beyond patience. Denise had been carrying the weight of his diner while Ross poisoned it from the inside. Harold's military instincts stirred, the old steel in his spine returning. He had fought injustice overseas. He wouldn't allow it to root itself here, in his own walls. Tomorrow, the mask would come off. He would no longer be the silent old man in the corner. Ross thought Denise was alone. He thought no one cared. But Harold cared. And come morning, everyone in that diner would know it. The next day, the diner bustled with its usual morning chaos. Coffee pots hissed, plates clattered, voices rose and fell like a tide. Denise moved between tables, her bandaged hand pressed against her apron, her smile faint but determined. To customers, she was just another waitress pushing through the grind. But Harold saw more. He saw the silent strength of someone carrying more than trays. He entered quietly, same boots, same denim jacket, settling into his booth. But his eyes weren't casual now. They locked on Ross, who strutted through the diner like he owned it. He barked at Denise, mocked her pace, drew chuckles from customers uncertain whether to laugh or pity. Harold stirred his coffee, silent, but this morning was different. He wasn't just watching anymore. Ross spotted Harold at his usual booth and smirked. "Back for eggs again, old man?" Harold didn't answer. Instead, he rose slowly, walked to the center of the diner, and tapped his spoon against his coffee cup. The metallic chimes silenced chatter. Forks paused mid-air. Curious eyes turned. Denise froze mid-step, her tray wobbling slightly. "Morning, everyone," Harold began, his voice steady. "I think it's time you all know who I really am." A nervous laugh bubbled from Ross. "What, writing a book?" Harold's gaze cut sharp. "No. I own this diner." Gasps rippled through the room. Denise's eyes widened, shock etching across her face. Ross's grin faltered, color draining. For years, nobody knew the quiet man in the corner booth was the one who held the keys. Harold reached beneath his jacket and pulled out a thick folder, placing it firmly on the counter. Pages spilled open, misconduct reports, register logs, financial sheets. "I've watched long enough," Harold said, voice calm but unyielding. "I know what you've been doing, Ross. Every false report against Denise, every dollar you skimmed, and I know what you did to her hand." The diner erupted in gasps, customers craning to see the documents. The two women from table 3 whispered furiously, "I knew it! I knew he was dirty!" Ross stammered, his face pale, words breaking. You can't prove anything!" His sentence cut short as the diner's front door swung open. 2 uniformed officers stepped inside, their presence enough to choke the air still. Justice had finally walked in. The diner went dead silent as the 2 officers stepped forward. Ross's false bravado cracked instantly. "Wait, this is a mistake," he sputtered, sweat forming along his hairline. Harold didn't flinch. The mistake was thinking no one was watching. He nodded toward the folder. One officer picked it up, scanning quickly, before exchanging a sharp glance with his partner. The cuffs clicked cold around Ross's wrists. Customers gasped. A fork clattered to the floor. Ross thrashed, shouting, "You can't do this! I run this place!" But his words only echoed hollow. Denise stood frozen, hand pressed to her chest, tears filling her eyes. For the first time, Ross wasn't looming over her. For the first time, the weight shifted.
As Ross was hauled toward the door, the diner erupted in murmurs. Denise stood rooted near the counter, her bandaged hand trembling. Her lips quivered as though holding back years of swallowed words. Harold turned, his expression softening. "You've carried this place on your back," he said firmly. "While others lied, you kept it running. From today forward, you're not just a waitress. You're the new floor supervisor." Denise blinked, stunned, her good hand flying to her mouth. The bandage trembled against her cheek as a muffled sob escaped. Customers rose to their feet, some clapping gently, others loud enough to shake the walls. For once, the applause wasn't pity, it was recognition. And for the first time in years, Denise stood taller, shoulders straight, seen for who she was. Applause swelled through the diner, rippling from booth to booth. The two women in business suits wiped tears from their eyes, whispering, "She finally got her justice." The young men near the window nodded, muttering, "Knew that manager was dirty." Even the cook, leaning out from the kitchen, raised a hand in support. Denise looked around, overwhelmed. For so long, whispers had been pity, laughter had been mockery. Now, voices rose for her. The diner smelled of grease and coffee as always, but the air itself felt lighter. Outside, Ross's shouts were muffled as the police car pulled away. Inside, the space he once poisoned was reclaimed by warmth. Harold gave Denise a small nod. She wasn't alone anymore, and everyone knew it.
Later that evening, the diner quieted again, but this time the silence felt peaceful. Denise wiped down tables with her good hand, still in disbelief at the title Harold had given her, supervisor. It felt like more than a promotion. It felt like being believed, finally. Harold sat back in his familiar booth, sipping his coffee, but his smile was different now. He wasn't just an old veteran blending into the crowd. He was an owner proud of the resilience he'd witnessed. Denise paused, catching his eye. For the first time, her smile wasn't a shield. It was genuine. Outside, the neon sign buzzed faintly, reflecting off wet pavement. A new chapter had begun, for the diner, for Harold, but especially for Denise. And this time, she wasn't carrying it alone. The next morning, the diner smelled the same, burnt coffee and frying bacon, but the atmosphere had changed forever. Denise moved with renewed confidence, her bandaged hand still healing, but her spirit unshaken. Customers greeted her warmly, respect clear in their eyes. Harold sipped his coffee quietly, proud but humble. The lesson lingered in every corner. Never underestimate the quiet strength of those who keep showing up, even when the world tries to break them. Denise's story proved that truth always wins, and justice always finds the guilty. For those watching, it was a reminder: stand up for what's right, no matter how small the act may seem. Because sometimes, one voice, one moment, is enough to change everything.
The dawn after Ross's arrest broke with a pink glow across the diner windows. Denise arrived early, as she always did, but something felt different. She unlocked the door with trembling hands, except this time, the tremble wasn't fear, it was excitement. Inside, the empty diner felt almost sacred, like a battlefield finally cleansed. She breathed in deeply, the smell of coffee and bacon grease still clinging to the air, but it no longer choked her. Instead, it smelled like possibility. As she tied her apron, she whispered to herself, "This is mine now too." The reflection in the glass showed a woman still bandaged, still healing, but no longer broken. For the first time, she felt like she belonged here, not as prey, but as the heart of the diner. Harold entered quietly, the way he always had, boots scuffing the floor, coffee order unchanged. But today, his eyes carried something new: relief.
He slid into his corner booth and watched Denise move through the diner. She still winced when her wrist bent wrong, but her smile was different, soft, real, no longer forced. Harold knew what it meant to fight battles others didn't see. In his military days, he had watched men hide their wounds behind gritted teeth. Denise reminded him of them, unbreakable, even when fractured. He raised his mug slightly in her direction, a silent salute. She caught it, nodding back with moist eyes. For Harold, owning the diner was business, but seeing Denise reclaim her dignity, that was personal, and it made every secret watch worth it. By midday, familiar faces filled the diner. Construction workers, office clerks, families with noisy kids. But something had shifted in the way they looked at Denise. The whispers were no longer pitying or skeptical. Instead, customers greeted her with warmth, some even clapping her shoulder as she passed. "Glad you're still here," one man said, sliding an extra bill into the tip jar. The two women in business suits returned, their smiles genuine now. "Supervisor looks good on you," one of them teased, earning a bashful laugh from Denise. The atmosphere buzzed differently. Where Ross once filled the air with cruelty, now respect grew, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For the first time, Denise realized she wasn't invisible. She mattered, to Harold, to the customers, and to herself. And yet, Ross's absence was felt in its own way. The diner no longer reeked of fear, but shadows of his cruelty lingered in Denise's memories. When a tray slipped slightly in her grip, she flinched, half expecting his barked insult, but instead, another waitress stepped forward. "Need a hand?" she asked kindly. Denise blinked, caught off guard. Kindness where there had once been venom. She nodded, murmuring thanks. Harold watched the exchange carefully, noting how quickly culture shifted when poison was removed. He thought of Ross, cuffed and gone, his voice fading into nothing. Ross had tried to make Denise the scapegoat, but instead, he had made her stronger. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about restoring balance. And in that moment, the diner felt balanced for the first time in years. That evening, as the last customer left, Denise locked the door and leaned against the counter. Her wrists still ached, but her spirit felt light. She thought back to the night Ross twisted her hand, to the tears she swallowed in silence, to the shame that wasn't hers to carry. And she thought of Harold, quiet, watchful Harold, who had chosen to believe her when no one else did. She smiled, realizing strength wasn't about pretending not to hurt, it was about rising anyway. She turned off the lights, the neon sign humming softly outside, and whispered, "Tomorrow will be better." For Denise Carter, it wasn't just another shift survived. It was the beginning of a future where she stood tall, unbroken, and finally seen. Harold lingered in the empty diner long after Denise left, his coffee untouched and cold. The hum of the refrigerators and faint smell of grease filled the silence. He thought back to his years in the service. Men punished for crimes, others let off too easily. Justice was rarely clean. Yet here, in this small-town diner, it had been served. He had seen cruelty rot from the inside out, and kindness overlooked until nearly broken. Denise reminded him of soldiers he once admired, those who carried wounds, yet kept marching. He knew he hadn't just saved his diner, he had saved its soul. He leaned back in the booth, staring at the door Denise had just walked through. For once, Harold smiled without the weight of secrets. Within days, the diner changed. The staff spoke softer, kinder. Laughter returned to the kitchen where Ross's sharp voice once cut like glass. Customers lingered longer, leaving bigger tips, as if gratitude filled the air. Denise moved with growing confidence, her wrists still bound but her steps steadier. She trained new hires with patience, offering encouragement Ross had never given. Even the walls seemed brighter, though the same paint chipped in the corners. The place didn't just serve coffee and bacon, it breathed hope again. Harold noticed how people gravitated toward Denise, as though she was the diner's heartbeat. For years he had built businesses, but none had felt alive the way this one did now. The difference was simple. Cruelty had left, and resilience had stayed. Meanwhile, Ross sat in a county holding cell, his swagger stripped away. Word of his arrest spread quickly, customers whispering about the fall of the arrogant manager. The financial records Harold uncovered became evidence, tying Ross to thousands in stolen cash. But worse than the theft was the truth about Denise's injury, his deliberate cruelty. Former staff came forward, recounting years of verbal abuse. The case grew larger by the day, until Ross realized there was no slipping free. For a man who once strutted through the diner like he owned it, the clang of prison bars was a fitting irony. Back at the diner, Denise didn't celebrate his downfall loudly, but inside, she felt a weight lift. Justice wasn't loud. Sometimes, it was as quiet as freedom.
Weeks later, Denise's bandages finally came off. Her wrist was stiff, but her strength was returning. Harold gathered the staff after closing, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "From this day forward," he announced, "Denise isn't just a waitress. She's this diner's floor supervisor, and the reason it still runs." Applause filled the room, louder than she ever expected. Denise's cheeks flushed, her eyes glistening. She had spent years believing she was replaceable, invisible. Now she was the face of resilience. That night, she stood outside under the neon glow, staring at the familiar sign. The diner hadn't changed, but she had. For the first time, Denise Carter didn't just belong, she led. The diner smelled the same, burnt coffee, fried bacon, but the air felt lighter, brighter. Customers still came and went, plates clattered, coffee poured. Yet beneath the ordinary hum, there was a story etched into every corner, of a woman who refused to break, of an owner who finally revealed himself, and of justice that came when least expected. Denise carried mugs to a table, her wrists steady now, her smile unforced. Harold watched from his corner booth, proud but silent. Some battles happen in silence. Some victories arrive quietly, without fanfare. This was one of them. Never underestimate the strength of those who endure, even when the world tries to crush them. Truth always finds the light. And here, in this small diner, it had.